sometimes your back's against the wall and you lost so many good people along the way. You're like, every time I had to replace an A player, it was disaster. I remember when one guy who's still working at Contango, the company that I sold, he came over and gave notice, and I wasn't letting this guy leave. I was like, he's just too good. He fits the company culture. So he passed me this piece of paper on the conference room table, and I was like, what? He was like, oh, it's just, it's my resignation. I was like, I'm not opening this. You're not going anywhere. We're figuring this out. What are you doing? Why would you be leaving? And like I said, he's still working there today.
Welcome back to another episode of the 1% Podcast. I'm your host, Vin and
I'm Shane.
And today we're here with my man, Danny Mizrahi. Danny, welcome to the show.
What's going on, guys? Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I don't know if I'm really in that same 1% that people think that is, the billionaires of the world, but whatever 1% you guys are doing here, I'm happy to be a part of it.
Stealing Vin's spiel.
That's it, man. That's the big thing. Well, we'll get to what it is to live a 1% life towards the end of the podcast.
Okay, good.
We'll totally get into that, but trust me, Danny, you are certainly in the 1%. Guys, Danny is an interesting guy. I met him at this. What would you call Core Club? What is that? It's not like a networking place, right? It's like co-working club.
Fancy private club in Midtown.
There you go.
Bar, restaurant, gym, steam, sauna. Hotel rooms, all that stuff. Just a great place to hang your hat, and like everyone knows your name, kind of thing. It's great.
Exactly. So I met Danny in a place I had no business being in because I'm not at all. I go everywhere with a black t-shirt, gym pants, and a hat on. So I don't belong in any of those places, but somehow they keep letting me in. So I met Danny. He's a great guy. He's got a phenomenal story, multiple exits under his belt, building another big company. Danny, please don't let me hype you up too much, but tell the audience a little bit more about your history, what you're working on, and who you are.
Yeah, sure. So, again, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. I started my first company when I was 26. It was IT managed services company, subscription IT support. Just thought I could do it better than my boss at the time. I was in sales. I always wanted to be a basketball coach, actually. I would wake up. The year before that, I would wake up at 4 a.m. every day. This is, I'm not 26 anymore. It was like almost 20 years ago or something. But I had a blog. Back in the day, a blog was not that common. I mean, nowadays, everyone and their grandmother has a blog, right? But back in the day, there was like a couple basketball blogs. So mine was called Breaking Down the Game. I was on CBS Sports and Newsday, and I would wake up every day at 4 a.m. and write about every single game the day before and really analyze everything. I had a couple posts that kind of went viral for, in terms of, what that means. But again, this is, I'm 42 now, so this is a long time ago. So anyway, I realized I wasn't going to be a basketball coach, but I was able to maximize strengths, minimize weaknesses, build a team, get the most out of my players by being an entrepreneur. And so I decided at 26 that I wanted to start my own IT company based on a lot of things that I knew was working, mostly things that I knew was not working. The company that I worked for was not a great or ethical company. And so I took the plunge and I started Contango. Fast forward many years later, we were Inc. 5000, which is great. I really love being on the Inc. 5000, America's fastest growing companies. Don't get me wrong. What I'm much more proud of is Inc. Best Workplaces, which is very, very hard award to win. If you know what you have to do to win that award, you know that it's so hard to win that award. You have to be completely obsessed with company culture. Yeah, fast forward, a friend of mine in a mutual entrepreneur peer group in Israel asked me to be a partner in a cybersecurity company. And then I exited the, Contango, exited GRC, for not only for this, there were great opportunities to exit, but now I have a new company. It's called Sunbird. It's a messaging app aggregator, putting all those messaging apps that you have in one app. So the WhatsApp, Facebook, iMessage, Google Messages, LinkedIn DMs, Instagram DMs. Very few companies out there doing this. My partner, or the inventor, has 9 awarded patents in text messaging, in the messaging space. So he basically came to me and said, I got something really special here, and I want a CEO that knows how to work on the business, not in the business, that knows how to grow and build And so that's how it started a little while ago. And we've raised some money. We've had some releases, and really excited for our next launch. Besides that, I live on the Upper East Side. I got 3 kids, and just living the dream, right?
Damn, man, it's such an interesting life you've already lived. You've had so many different experiences. I'm curious, before we really get into it, which has been your favorite thing to build and why?
Well, the company culture at Contango was my favorite thing. There's nothing, winning Inc. Best Workplaces was the lagging indicator, we call it, in the world of EOS or E-Myth, Michael Gerber's E-Myth Revisited, or Scaling Up and Rockefeller Habits. We call it leading indicators and lagging indicators. So the lagging indicator was winning an award, but the activities that it took to get there was just a total obsession with company culture. And then, we use EOS. We used Who, the A method of hiring. I don't know if you read Who by Jeff Smart. To me, that's like the Bible on hiring, pretty much. So we use that methodology in and out to hire the right people in the right seats. We use the EOS scorecards to make sure that we were tracking everything in terms of what people need to be measured on. And we did we had so much fun. We did Dungeons and Dragons one day in the conference. I never played Dungeons and Dragons before, but we had this dungeon master come in who brought a microphone and music and was like, and the thunderous blah 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 came down from the clouds. I was like, oh my god, this is amazing, right? So we've done escape rooms, and then we had 25 people in the Philippines when I sold the company, but we still did virtual company events every month as well. So we did escape rooms on Zoom, we did Family Feud and games and karaoke and all these things. So really that was my favorite. We don't have as big of a staff at Sunbird to be able to do that kind of company culture, and there's very few people in the States. The programmers are mostly overseas, so we we're not as bonded as that, right?
I want to talk about the culture real quick. As somebody who has an employment company, if you can focus on your employees versus your clients, and you can figure that early on, you will create somebody who wants to break their back for you, somebody who will do anything to get the company to where it needs to be, or to improve SOPs, or to improve the health. If you actually build that rapport in the relationship with your employees or with your contractors, and you make them feel like part of the family, they will never leave you. And adapting that culture early on and being able to exit that and growing that foundation is something that I look to do, in the future, whenever that, end period is. So I emulate that. I want to get.
Sorry, Shane. Well, let me just piggyback on one thing on that, right? Please. Because I think it's a little hack that I want to make sure everyone hears, right? So we do a 10-minute phone screen when we do interviews for every single position. 10-minute phone screen, and most of it is just to like rule out if they don't know these certain things. I'm not doing an hour interview with them, and I'm not doing any of these. The last interview was always with me, the CEO, and I only sold them on the 5 F's: fit, fun, family, fortune, and freedom, right? So when it got to me, we already knew we wanted them. Second interview was always that technical test, right? Whatever it is that they need to do for this, because we would never hire anyone and train. I haven't hired someone and trained them in like 12 years. Every single job we've ever had, it's an expert coming in and they do the job. But that 10-minute phone screen, just because people are watching this, I think is a good hack. One of the questions that we always ask is, what's the hardest you've ever worked? The question is vague on purpose. That's the question. What is the hardest you've ever worked? The question is vague on purpose. And because I used to say, what's the hardest you've ever worked? And they say, well, I don't know. It was, do you mean personal? Do you mean business? I'm like, no. The question is vague on purpose. Take it however you want to take it. Now, when I had people that said, well, this one time there was this problem and it took me all night to solve, right? And they really thought that was considered hard work. And I was like, oh, great answer, great. I mean, obviously that's the worst answer. But when I heard people say, well, I mean, I was in school, I had 2 jobs, I had a sick parent, if they said, military or something like that, amazing answers. When people really understood what hard work actually means,
that's fun.
Yeah, all of the people that we hired all had that kind of mentality. That was a huge hack for us, and it was like a 2-minute hack, right? So I just want to make sure people are listening that, that little trick of the trade. Sorry, but you were saying, Shane.
I
mean, I've been in this industry for over a decade now, and I've already written down 4 things in 9 minutes that we've been talking. So, I mean, this is obviously coming from an expert now, and I want to transition into the company that you're now. For some reason, and I think I've heard the overview a little wrong. I don't know if you've ever seen the TV show The Office, right? Very popular, very common one. It reminded me of Wolf.com. That you say something and it goes out on Facebook, Instagram. I'm sure that I got that wrong. Could you give me like a little bit more detailed of an overview of what this company truly is? Because I don't want to do it injustice. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So it's a messaging app aggregator. What we're doing. So remember, I don't know your guys' age. You look a little younger than me, but if you ever used Outlook, right? Outlook. So the first time I used Outlook, I was able to connect my Gmail. I was able to connect my Yahoo. I was able to connect my AOL, right? It's called a thin client. It's the one place, and you have all these different folders, let's call them, or different mailboxes, right? So Sunbird's the same thing with messaging. And you have iMessage, you have Google Messages, you can sort them. You have WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, LinkedIn DMs, right? So, and then in our newest version that's going to be coming out in the future, we have a primary and a secondary inbox. So not only do you have all those messages coming into Sunbird, but your home screen will have only the threads that you really want. Maybe it's 2 Telegram conversations, maybe it's 2 Signal conversations, maybe it's 3 WhatsApp conversations or groups, right? And then we want, and we've had a beta where people were in the app like all day, every day, which was awesome. An alpha that people were in the app all day, every day. And at that time, we really only had Google Messages, iMessage, and SMS. But here's the deal. Right now, we're just an Android app. Why are we just an Android app? Because we have iMessage on Android. And when you have iMessage on Android, blue bubbles on your Android, and you're fixing the group chat, with all the things that are broken between the group chat, which you guys have seen, a million times. And there's still articles coming out all the time. I see them all the time saying, girls won't date guys with green bubbles, right? It's crazy. Look, I'm a little older. I don't care as much, but here's a crazy stat. When a 13 to 40-year-old comes to our website and they're holding an Android, the conversion rate on our website is 47%. 47% conversion rate when a 13 to 40-year-old holding an Android comes to our website. That's how badly. We have 190,000 people on our wait list today, right? So there's a massive demand for what we're having, not just the app aggregation, but just iMessage on Android.
So it's essentially a universal inbox where you can go to that everything comes in.
Yeah, we don't have everything in it today, but that is what the invention is, and we're putting one app at a time. Today we have iMessage, Google Messages, and SMS. And we used to have WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger in the app, but those we put on pause because we had to go all in on Google Messages because our Android users just got Google Messages recently, and they were like, oh man, I only want one messaging app. If you I have to have iMessage and Sunbird. And right. WhatsApp would be nice, but if you don't give me Google Messages, like you guys are iPhone users, you probably don't even know what Google Messages is, but it's like finally Android users have a decent messaging app. So if you don't give me Google Messages, I'm always going to have 2 messaging apps. So for us, we said, all right, well, that's not what we wanted at launch. We didn't want an Android user saying I'm using 2 messaging apps. We wanted them to use just Sunbird. And so that's why after alpha, we came back and said, all right, let's make a new version and put Google Messages in, pause WhatsApp and Facebook. We'll put them back in the future, but pause those. And then we'll get, we'll make sure to, and then when we did a 6-month beta with just Google Messages and iMessage and SMS, we had I think it was 29%. It's been a while. It was a couple months ago, 29% conversion rate after a 7-day free trial. Phenomenal conversion rate after a 7-day free trial, and 54% of people that downloaded the app actually signed up for the 7-day free trial. Sometimes you download an app and it says start your free trial. You delete it 90% of the time.
100%.
54% of people were like, let's start that 7-day free trial, and then 29% of them actually paid every month. And we
That
had a very, very low churn as well.
it's okay. So I'm gonna get a little technical here, and feel free to not answer anything. But obviously, this is a brilliant concept for C2C, for consumer to consumer, and I could see why massive amounts of people can download this. For businesses, are you planning on having any sort of database for this? For like, for instance, my whole entire thing uses a variety of Teams chats. It used to be Slack, or Slack. It used to be Skype. It used to be the actual Google Chat, WhatsApp. And then you're integrating things through all of the social channels, right? Like when you're dealing things on a company level with hundreds and hundreds of things that you have to go to all these places, like to me, it seems like you'll be able to utilize Zap or Make and just essentially send it over to the master inbox. But I know that sounds easy, but actually making it happen is one thing. And now are you just going to get flooded with thousands of things? I feel like I'm answering my own question here, but are you transitioning at all or ever going into businesses, or is it just not relevant or needed?
Well, it's relevant. It's needed. It's not our low hanging fruit. You
Yeah.
know, our low hanging fruit is being
Consumers.
the best Android app in the world, right?
Yeah.
And 73% or 74% of the world is Android. So that's really our focus right now, is just being
Makes
the best
sense.
Android app in the world.
Mass
And
public.
then there are definitely B2B implications. We've been in discussions with telco companies in different parts of the world that want like exclusivity in their region, or
Of course.
the ability to put that, you know, the messenger in their own app for more eyeballs, and you know, so. And then I'm very hot on the Asia market, because in Asia, specifically Japan, China, Thailand, Singapore, and Korea, they all have their own. Each one has their own messaging app.
Yeah.
So I had a friend that moved here from China recently, and she showed me her folder for all her Asian messaging apps, and it's
Right.
insane. And then she has WhatsApp, Facebook, Telegram, Signal, iMessage, whatever on top of that. Right. So we have like a really nice low hanging fruit here that we want to tackle. But look, we still think we're going to be one of the biggest messengers in the world, if not the biggest messenger in the world. So we got plenty of. We have. I mean, there's financial implications as well. I'm not going to get into, you know, some of the things that we have on our roadmap, but putting a payment platform in a messenger is a no brainer.
Yeah.
You know, so we have some really fun stuff, you know, in that we've already discussed with wallet companies to incorporate. And frankly, the 5 wallet companies that we spoke to all said, as soon as you get the users, please use us, because once you get the users, you know, that's when you can, you know, make some really great partnerships as well. So, you know, all things are related to, you know, the first low hanging fruit, which is like, let's get all those users, right?
My mind's transitioning to investment platform, and I don't want to take the whole podcast here. So then you're up.
Damn right I'm up. Been sitting here twiddling my thumbs. I'm like, this is all fascinating. I have questions too. So Shane loves asking the super technical business stuff. I love learning more about the internal workings of the individual and what it takes to really get to the points that you guys are at. So my question's a little bit more on that personal side of, I'd love to know, and maybe some of the audience members would love to know too, guys. Don't leave me hanging that I'm the only one here. But I'd love to know, what was maybe a major decision or a big moment of doubt that you had to make or overcome to get to this point? Like what was something that really helped shape you, whether it was personally or professionally?
I mean, look, my entire, you know, starting a company at 26, being an entrepreneur at 26, I think you go through imposter syndrome, you know, pretty frequently. So I've always, you know, dealt with that. You know, thankfully I have incredible support around me. Being an EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, for like 14 years, which is an international organization for entrepreneurs, really creative name. And that has been instrumental. You know, those peer groups and whatnot. Vistage, I was in and out of Vistage for 10 years, if you're familiar with that one. So that was really helpful. I had an awesome Vistage coach when I was like 27 or something that really helped me, you know, work on the business, not in the business. But, you know, I mean, doubters is, you know, doubters in general, it gets a little old. It gets a little frustrating. So, you know, you gotta, I think once I started really learning that you are not your ups and downs at work, So I've had so many ups at work that it was so easy to associate myself with my ups and downs at work because I had so many ups at work. And then all of a sudden you have some downs at work and it gets really depressing. So, starting to I do a lot of therapy. I love therapy and coaching. I always have a therapist. I always have a coach. Right. So, and then I have my peer group and, all that fun stuff. Right. So, in general, I would just say just doing a lot of work on that. Right. Like you are not, you are you and your ups and downs at work or your ups and downs at work and disassociating has really helped me a lot with, with not just being able to deal with the downs at work, but also the effect is you wind up doing your best more often because you can disassociate and just try to kick ass, right? So I think that's something that has helped me along the way.
I'm a big fan of, understanding our failures and growing from them. Understanding that failure is usually the biggest learning experience we could have. Overcoming like those doubts that you have, the imposter syndrome, all of those different things, they're so freaking important. I'm curious too, because as you go through this journey, you've learned a lot clearly about yourself. You've learned a lot about business. I wonder if there's any controversial or more against the grain opinions that you might have that you're willing to speak about either the industry you're in or just some of the things that people think they understand about life that you completely have learned to be untrue.
About life, sorry, help me understand the question a little bit more. And is it like just the entrepreneur life?
Yeah, like going against the grain of what people think about either in entrepreneurship or even in your own industry that you've seen professionally.
Hmm? I think that at first everyone used to always say, "Wow, you own your own business. You get to make your own hours. You get to do whatever you want to do." Right? It was like, I don't know, man. I work for everyone, right? Like, I work for everyone, right? So everyone's like, you work for yourself, like you do whatever you want. No, I work for everyone. I work for the clients. I work for the staff. I work for my family. I work for everyone, right? So it doesn't feel like that a lot of the time until you really mature as a business owner and really, delegate and elevate. They call it an EOS, right? So, when I started getting the right people, like when I sold Contango, I was working in that business very few hours a week, which is why I was able to get like a really good multiple on it, because they knew I was not really part of the business at all anymore, except for really cheerleading. I was if whoever's watching this, if you know the entrepreneur operating system, I was really in that visionary role, and I had an incredible. Mike was an amazing integrator who was sitting in that like COO integrator role and just feeding me the data I needed to feed, and frankly, just letting me know who I needed to go coach, right? Who needed a pep talk, right? Like, and then my job was culture, big ideas, partnerships, relationships, some damage control when a client gets upset, XYZ, right? So I see Shane is like, yeah, man, that's the story of my life too. So yeah, I mean, I think once I elevated to that, delegate and elevate to the place where I was able to like really, work on the business, not in the business, then I really did start to feel like, okay, maybe these people are right, right? Now I created this is the difference between an asset and a liability, and the difference between being a technician and an entrepreneur, right? In eMyth, they call it the difference between technician, manager, and entrepreneur. And so, that's really, I think, and that's why they call it eMyth. So the myth of, you could do whatever you want as an entrepreneur, and you might be able to get there, but it does take a lot of time. It takes a lot of trust, and it takes a lot of process, and definitely around hiring the right people, and then coaching the right people, and then having a great review structure around the right people, constantly getting feedback from them. Like we did a survey every month called employee satisfaction. We were measuring ESAT, employee satisfaction. So if anyone had issues, it was anonymous, but the things that they wrote in the survey every single month were always opportunities for me to be at like the company meeting and say, hey, look, someone wrote XYZ. I don't care who wrote it, but we are committed to making sure I never see that again. Right. So it's a lot of good coaching. It's a lot of. I know Vin, you're an amazing coach too, so you get it. So, but it is a lot of good coaching.
Where did you get the drive to be so people centric? I mean, this is such a rare occurrence. There's so many people. In fact, we actually had a really high end business coach on here, Shane. I don't know if you remember, And he said, it's never about culture if you actually want to build a company. Culture is the last thing you focus on. You focus on talent. And those words stuck with me because I think a lot like you. I'm very people-centric. And so where did you get this drive? Why do you want such a phenomenal culture? Why does it matter so much to you?
I mean, it starts at the core values, right? So like our core values were to always improve, work together, support each other, be professional, right? Like we had these core values that were, well, it's funny when I got married, I had like 3 employees, I think, at my wedding, and my wedding vows, um, they said to me afterwards, they were like, Danny, I don't know if you want to tell Sarah this, but your wedding vows were the same as the company's core values. So I was like, yeah, it kind of makes sense because I was just always preaching those same things, right? That's
Sure.
just who I was and what it meant to me. And so, I don't know. So, but where did that come from? Well, some of it came from I worked for a guy before I started my company that made everyone cry all the time. So, like, that didn't work. That was really bad, right? So I learned the hard way. I mean, I used to cry, because of him. He was terrible. He was mean. He was really mean. Um, and but yeah, I don't know. Some of it's sort of like back against the wall sometimes as an entrepreneur. It's like, I remember when one guy who's still working at Contango, the company that I sold, he came over and gave notice, and I wasn't letting this guy leave. I was like, he's just too good. He's too awesome. He fits the company culture. And so he passed me this piece of paper on the conference room table, and I was like, what the fuck is this? And he was like, oh, it's just, it's my resignation. I was like, I'm not opening this. You're not going anywhere. We're figuring this out. What are you doing? Why would you be leaving? And like I said, he's still working there today. Right? And this was years and years ago, right? So my point was sometimes your back's against the wall and you lost so many good people along the way that you're like every time, and I was taught this too through like peer groups and stuff, but every time I had to replace an A player, it was disaster. It was a disaster for the business, right? So accumulating A players that are, an EOS, Shane. Yeah, I know you're gonna know. Yeah, of course. It gets it, wants it, capacity. So in these systems, it's like they have to be the core values, and then they have to GWC, gets it, wants it, capacity to do it, right? And so I'm looking at all this when I'm interviewing people, and then we have these hacks on the reference check. Everyone says the same thing, like reference checks don't matter, right? And that's not true. Like you can do amazing stuff on a reference check. So, one of the questions I always ask is rate the person on a scale of 1 to 10. And nobody says 10 because nobody's perfect, right? So, a lot of people are like, oh, I would rate the person like an 8 out of 10 or something. I'm like, oh, that's great. That's great. All right. How do I get them from an 8 to a 10? And that's all of a sudden when they're like, oh, well, and then you start hearing all these things that, some of it wasn't so good. Well, yeah, they weren't really on time all the time, right? They were late a lot, right? And when they say that, late a lot, I'm like, no chance. I'm done. Because I'm psychotic when it comes to early's on time. On time is late, late is forgotten, right? So I'm crazy on that. So there was no way that would fly, but that would happen a bunch of times on reference checks. But to answer your question in short, I think it was a mixture of who I am and necessity.
Love it.
I'd like to give a quick overview there because I think talent and culture go hand in hand. And what Danny did when, that employee slided over his resignation on a piece of paper or whatever envelope, whatever the case may be. The key thing here is you fought for him. I'm not letting you go. Let's figure this out. Right. It's really, really tough to replace a talent, and there's no point. And I think that's the big difference between company culture is that you have a CEO, you have a boss that's willing to fight for you and say, how can we make this right? Compared to, great, thanks for your time. I'm going to find hopefully somebody better and waste more time, energy, and money in trying to find this replacement. That's where the culture comes in. You were able to save the talent. That's why you were able to, have this Inc. Best because of you and your partner as well. I want to bring back one thing that you mentioned that I think is very, very important, especially when it comes to successful business owners, more importantly, entrepreneurs. is that you said that you have a coach and a therapist at all time. I think that entrepreneurship, being in my journey, and Vin knows this a lot about me, I am very comfortable staying behind my computers that I have over here, behind the screens, and building my business because that's what I'm good at. I don't like networking. And this is a very lonely job. I have a wife and 2 kids, and I work for everybody still, even though everything is delegated at this point. But it can get very lonely. I think to be successful, you need to have your dream team, which is, a therapist, a coach, somebody who motivates you. Hitting your goals and aspirations is very, very tough to do alone, right? Even if you're so great at learning from failures, but able to vent and able to speak that out loud, I think is an easy game plan of success to having a coach and therapist. When did you figure that out?
When did I figure that out? I mean, well, the coaching part. Well, first of all, I've coached over 70 entrepreneurs over the $1 million mark. Almost all of them are getting over the $1 million mark through EO and the accelerator program there, and I get amazing joy out of that. It's a volunteer thing, and I remember there was so many times where I was like, I don't have time to do this. I'm so busy, but I don't have time to coach these, small business entrepreneurs. But I would learn so much by being their coach.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to practice what I preached, right? Like I didn't want to be that guy that was like, do as I say, not as I do, right? So I think that that really helped me for understanding the need for me to also have a coach whenever I didn't have a coach, right? I mean, and then I have an accountability group as well, and we meet weekly to do goal check-in, right? On track, off track kind of thing. And we change our goals every month. It's just, so I know what it's like when people don't have that, and the growth is just so much slower.
Yeah.
Right.
So funny that you mentioned that. I had zero entrepreneurial sense to me. When I first started as a coach, I came from a 9-to-5 background, knowing 9-to-5 people. I've had no entrepreneurs in my family, no entrepreneurs in my friend circle. Everything and everyone in my life was 9-to-5 mindset mentality. And somehow, some way, I got my first entrepreneurial client. It was really a very random occurrence. Started working with him. Somebody thought I could help their other entrepreneurial friends, started working with him. And just through being in there, trying to help these guys, I started learning about business. Like I remember my client, for one of my first entrepreneurial clients, came to me. He's like, my guy isn't hitting his KPIs. He's not putting the information into the CRM properly. This guy's screwing up and I'm getting pissed. And I'm like, interesting. We'll talk about why you're pissed. But first, what is a KPI and a CRM?
Right. They're a bunch of
these guys just taught me.
Yeah, TLAs, 3-letter acronyms.
Right. So I love it, man. It's so true. By being able to be around people, you could absorb so much, but that is the massive benefit of like being a coach or coaching in general, or therapy or mentoring, whatever it is. So I love that you bring that up. Now, Danny, we are coming close to the end here. So I have a few final questions I'm eager to ask you. One of them actually going back to the 1% thing. So here's what we got for you, my man. We named it the 1% podcast, not because of the fact that we're billionaires yet, but because of the fact that we believe there is a 1% version of everything in life. There's 1% dads, there's 1% entrepreneurs, there's 1%, I don't know, pull-up champions. So when we liked this podcast, why we built it was because of the fact that we want to understand how are people elevating themselves in unique ways that might take them into that 1% category of life. And so our question to you is this: what is your version of living a 1% life? How are you striving greatly to change things and shake things up in your own world so you can live a life very differently than the rest?
Well, that changes a lot based on what I'm working on, based on like what challenges I'm facing, usually internally. And so for me, actually, I'll tell you, I've been doing cold plunge a lot. I don't know if you guys do cold plunge, but it is like 2 minute cold plunge. And when I first did it, have you guys done cold plunge? Like, you know,
I have a pool in the back. That's pretty much. I do the same thing, but
yeah.
it's not as cold.
Yeah, well, this is like 35 degrees
Yeah.
kind of thing. And so what happens is when you go into the ice, you hyperventilate and your body goes into fight or flight.
Right.
And so when I first started doing cold plunge, it would take around 25 to 35 seconds for me to regulate. And then the next like minute or whatever, I can like calm down and just be kind of like in the water, right?
Sure.
Now I go into the cold plunge and I'm able to basically just go in and breathe out and be calm within like 5 seconds, right? And just sit there for 2 minutes and just let the medicinal benefits do their work, right? Which is, you know, anti-inflammation is probably one of the big ones, but then the metaphor and the mental benefits has been translating to me for many scenarios in my life when all of a sudden my heart is racing and I imagine being in the cold plunge and getting back into a slow breathing rhythm much quicker. I have had heart health history issues in my family. My doctor already thinks I should go on statins, and I'm exploring that, right? You know, just for, you know, artery stuff, right? And that's inflammation a lot, right? And so, and that's stress. My point was going to be that's stress too, right? So, you know, when the 1% that I'm really trying to work on is just not letting outside things affect me, staying calm under pressure, which leads to, you know, doing your best at most, if not all times, if you can. And so I would say that's a very big benefit of cold plunge and the metaphor and the physical.
I love it. I love cold plunges. Text our friend Jake and ask him how long my cold plunge was.
Yeah. Cool. How long was your cold plunge? I don't even know if it's healthy after 2 minutes.
I was in there for 10.
10 minutes. Wow, that's wild.
Chilling, literally.
Yeah. So yeah, do you go? I mean, separate. I was going to say, do you go to Othership? Othership, you know, I'm not like an investor. I know Jake is, but you know, I'm not an investor in Othership or anything. But I'm drinking that Kool-Aid pretty hard right now. It's been phenomenal.
It's great.
You know, benefit for me on so many levels.
Yeah, I like Othership. I hate cold plunges. I don't think they're fun. Sauna, I'm not a massive fan of. I just do these things. Period.
It's good. Yeah, well, you know, maybe the next one we'll talk about medicinal journeys. I'm sure you've had people talk about that.
Oh yeah, we'll get you. Yeah. We'll get you back. So, Danny, next question for you, my man. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Best piece of advice I've ever received, man. I wish you told me that was going to be one of the questions ahead of time. That's a tough one. Oh man, this is going to be really kind of crazy, but I guess my dad told me kids bring wealth, and I was really scared to have kids because of money. And you know, every time I had a kid, I had a lot more money. You know, thank God. You know, so. You know, I don't know why. If you know, maybe it was back against the wall. Maybe it was, you know, like be more efficient.
Interesting.
You know, stop, you know, wasting your time on low impact activities, right? Things like that. So, you know, I was really scared to have kids, and he said kids bring wealth, and I was like, what are you, fucking crazy? That doesn't make any sense, right? So, and it wound up being right. So I don't know why that popped into my head, but
love it.
But you know, business wise, the advice that I've always been getting has all been so good. I mean, you know, I go back to the book, like a lot of the books that I treat as textbooks, right? So like Leadership and Self-Deception by the Arbinger Institute is my favorite leadership book. To me, it's a must read. Who the A Method of Hiring is a must read. E-Myth, I won't even talk to an entrepreneur about growing their business unless they read E-Myth, just because it's like so foundational, right? The Dalai Lama's Art of Happiness is next to my bedside table with little notes in it, kind of thing, right? That one's really important to me. So there's all these like textbooks. Well, they're not textbooks, obviously, they're books, but in my mind, they're sort of like textbooks. And then the differences between the different levels of learning, right? So there's reading it, there's implementing it, but then the best way of learning is teaching it. That's how you really can get it all down, right? So I'm glad that I have the opportunity to teach entrepreneurs or just people that I walk, day-to-day stuff. That really helps me enforce it in my mind as well.
I love it. It's funny, back to that stat about children, is that they found there was like a bit of a research that they did, and I forgot who they were, but they were talking about the successful people in a ranking, right? Like who makes the most money. On the very bottom was single guys. In the middle was guys with girlfriends. And then on the top, it was guys with wives and children, because men do extremely well when they're purpose driven. And when we're purpose driven, it's about focus on external, right? Like there's internal desire, but external service. And so I'm 100% a believer in that. I'm excited. I got a second kid on the way. I can't wait to make more money. With that being said, Danny, final question for you before we wrap it today, my man. How can people get in touch with you? How can they find you? Where can they go to utilize your product, services? What do you got for us?
Sure. Well, I mean, look, Danny Mizrahi on LinkedIn, if you put it in, I'm sure I'm going to come up in the top or one of the top 3 or something. It's a pretty common name in some parts of the world, but, in LinkedIn, I've seen it come up pretty quickly. Look, if you're an Android user, go to sunbirdapp.com, and get excited about Sunbird, that's for sure. I'm an open book, so anyone who wants to reach out, please do.
All right. Thanks so much for being here today, my man. We really appreciated it. Love the wisdom and the insights you shared. Definitely looking forward to staying connected, doing a few more things, maybe some cold plunges and whatnot. We'll figure that one out. But dude, again, thank you so much for coming today. We really, really appreciate having you here.
It was an honor. Thanks, guys, for having me. Thank you so much, and see you guys soon.
Of course. Guys, there you have it. That's another episode of the 1% podcast in the books. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you thought of the episode, and we'll see you on the next one. As always, I'm your host, Vin, and
I'm Shane.
And that was Danny, everybody. See ya.
Bye, guys.
Hey, guys.